Have you ever referenced this scene?
Oh, what's in the box?
Of course you have. And in that case, you're gonna love this video where we wrap up all the movies that I saw this January 2025. There were 8 of them, kind of a quiet month for me as far as movies go. So I'm just gonna chat about them in chronological order. Let's get cozy, guys. Let's get to know each other here. And slide me a comment what your favorite movie was that you watched this month, because I love watching movies that are recommended to me by other people. My first watch of 2025 was on New Year's Day, where I watched Spiderhead, the 2022 kind of suspense thriller movie from Netflix starring Chris Hemsworth and Miles Teller about a prison that's actually kind of a luxury island resort, but the price of being incarcerated there is that you consent to be a pharmaceutical lab rat for experimental drug testing. Honestly, I was hooked by the premise. I thought it was super unique, and I thought like Chris Hemsworth, Miles Teller, like surely we're gonna have some fun here. And it started out really promising, setting the scene and showing us the drug testing and the psychedelic effects with this dreamy sequence that I thought worked really well. But after that, it kind of fell into a rut. Like, don't get me wrong, the plot stays interesting, and we do get some uncomfortable scenes with like the drug testing and the morality of all that, but this is exactly the type of movie that I think would lend itself so well to that kind of A24, like freakish, dreamy sequences and weird editing and scene pacing where you almost don't know what's real. And it was just shot and lit in such a like by the book kind of bland way that just showed things happening with like flat commercial lighting and not really much visual spin. And then add to that some like editing mistakes and this weird desire to like add comedy during serious moments, and it just like undercut a lot of the tension for me. It was fun though to see Chris Hemsworth acting against type. He's like a nerdy science guy who wants to collect all the data and take the proper readings, and he talks like this. Like there was this one action scene where he had to be bad at the action because that's his character, and that was fun to watch. Overall, Spiderhead had a lot of potential, and I would say I still enjoyed watching it. I just wish they could have committed to a more serious tone and made some kind of creative, freaky visual choices to suit like a really uncomfortable and psychedelic plotline. But it was directed by Joseph Kosinski, who had Top Gun Maverick come out that same year, so he got his win. I didn't even realize I had that much to say about Spiderhead. Now, the next movie I watched was the original animated 101 Dalmatians from 1961. I realized I haven't seen a lot of the like classic old Disney movies, so I'm trying to fill in that blind spot, and I found 101 Dalmatians pretty charming. Everyone is like violently British, which is super awesome. Like some of the slang they have in this movie is so ridiculous. I couldn't even tell if it was just outdated British stuff or if Disney was just like making stuff up and seeing if we'd notice. I think I didn't realize how little the human main characters are actually in this movie. Like the villains, obviously, but what are their names? Roger and Anita? They're like never in it, which is good. I thought the animal world was so much more interesting, and the jazz music on the soundtrack was so lovely. That was such a nice surprise. I'm gonna mention this again later, but I think one of the things that Disney movies now are missing is like 4 or 5 supporting characters whose names we know, who have distinct personalities and like ambitions, and who exist for a purpose other than just comedy. And 101 Dalmatians has that. And a special shout out too for a supporting role by Thurl Ravenscroft, the guy with the really deep voice who sings the Grinch song. Number 3, continuing my animated movie catch-up spree, I guess, I watched Don't Laugh, Hotel Transylvania. Now I'm in the middle of watching the show Samurai Jack, and knowing that Genndy Tartakovsky went from making that and the original Clone Wars series to then making Hotel Transylvania like messes with my mind. I feel like I grouped these together in my mind with like the Despicable Me franchise in that box of like a comedic actor doing a weird accent for the whole movie, and like weird little sidekicks who just exist to get into hijinks, and like endless sequels. But honestly, I found this a lot more bearable than Minions Rise of Gru. Although, side note, do you guys know when there's like a movie with characters who aren't human, and so they take like a normal person phrase and they like replace the human part of it to apply to those characters, and that's supposed to like get a laugh? Like if we were watching a movie about like a family of lions and they were like, Billy, don't forget to eat your human, and it's supposed to be like tongue-in-cheek. So many of those jokes. But they realize as long as there's like a family dynamic and some character growth, there's a grounding element. And I love how Adam Sandler manages to get his entire family supporting roles in like everything that he's in. Plus, my friend Sammy absolutely loves this franchise, and she was like so pumped that I was watching this. So because of her, I think I enjoyed it probably a little more than it deserved. Alrighty, back to movies that will not get me spit on Letterboxd. Watched my first international movie of the year, the French film Beau Travail from 1999, directed by Claire Denis. Great movie. forced me to really like get into the weeds of the subtext, and I thought it was really strong. In only an hour and a half, Denis gives us this kind of dissection of masculinity and living within a regimented structure like the military. And she gives all the male characters this softness that I think as an American I was surprised to see in like a military movie, because ours aren't always like that, but it was really humanizing and such a welcome addition. This movie's about a troop of the French Foreign Legion who are stationed in Djibouti, and they're kind of in maintenance mode. They're not actively at war, and they have this new recruit who kind of almost through no fault of his own becomes like rivals or like butts heads with the kind of squad leader. And it just starts this really kind of slow burn conflict that comes to a head near the end. The landscapes of Djibouti were so beautiful. I think that's where they filmed it. I'm not like 100% sure, but those kind of wide, empty, sandy landscapes meshed so well with the kind of quiet, introspective voiceover of the main character, who is the sergeant and like squad leader, by the way, not the recruit, as you might think. I won't spoil like details about it, but the ending draws such a hard contrast from the rest of the movie. It's unbridled, it's chaotic, and it's really a needed kind of cathartic release from just the slow burn that we've been dealing with the rest of the movie. And it really kind of filled me with this energy that I didn't even realize had been gone. This is not everyone's cup of tea. It leaves more unanswered than it answers, I think, but Denis, to me, just had such a strong handle on the subtext where you have just enough information to understand the basics, but never so much that you stop kind of wondering about characters' thoughts and motivations. I think the best word I could describe it with is like entropy. It's a movie about how when you like stoke this energy in people, but you don't give them anywhere to direct it, that energy kind of festers and like becomes destructive. Lots to say about the male body, the human spirit, routine and confinement, and like how it affects a person to have your purpose given to you rather than seeking it for yourself. So if you're someone who's willing to give a more like art house abstract movie a try, Beau Travail is for sure worth 93 minutes. Next is another military movie, but in like a super different way. I watched Civil War, the 2024 release, directed by Alex Garland. This movie was so beautifully shot. Like some really gritty and like heart-pounding sequences in there, especially the scene with Jesse Plemons.
What kind of American are you?
I mean, if you've seen it, you know. And there were a couple moments of real visual like beauty and power, which I mean, by this point we know we can count on A24 to give us. Now this movie is about if the US crumbled into a civil war in present day, obviously very ripe for political messaging. So I was curious what Garland's take was going to be, and he just didn't really seem to pick one. You know, here's this war happening, and war is bad, and the politicians that are causing the war are bad, and the journalists that are sensationalizing violence are also bad, and the people participating in the war are intolerant, the people ignoring it are ignorant. I mean, it was just kind of a lot of messages being thrown around, and while I can't really like disagree with any of them, it just felt kind of incomplete because none of them really get fleshed out and explored. My other maybe whiny complaint with this one is that it was a little tough to get into because it felt like some of the character development was happening off screen, like during these needle drop montages. Like the characters would finish one scene and then a song would play and they'd be in the car driving somewhere else, and then when they get to this other place, one of them is acting differently, like the development happened during the part that we didn't see. I can handle that once in a while, but this just felt like once or twice too many for me, and especially with Kirsten Dunst's character, I felt like we could use a little more time inside her head. And I mean, some people would say that being locked out of her head was the point because you're supposed to form your own opinions of what her motivations are, and I get that, but it was just with a lot of gelatinous themes being thrown around and no real point of main character identification, it definitely was tough to maintain emotional investment. That being said though, Stephen McKinley Henderson was the unsung hero of this movie for me. He was just... guy has so much gravitas. Like, oh my god, he was just someone who we could kind of lock onto in this movie, and he'd keep everything grounded for us. And I thought Kaylee Spaney did a pretty good job as well, and the two of them kind of provided a nice counterpoint to the inscrutability of Dunst's character. Why is that so hard to say? Dunst's. I'm like struggling with it. Dunst's. I know it seems like I'm like pretty down on this movie, but that's only because I had such high hopes for it. Like when I think Alex Garland, I think Ex Machina immediately. And I have faith he can put out another movie of that caliber. I think he can. Plus, I love when directors are like ambitious with the themes they're tackling in their work. So even if this movie wasn't like my cup of tea per se, I'm glad Alex Garland is like swinging for the fences like this. And I'm glad that movies like this exist. The same day I saw Civil War, actually, I doubled it up with one of my best theater experiences in so long. I saw David Fincher's Seven in theaters for the 30th anniversary of its release in 1995. Now, I've seen Seven before, and I loved it, but is it possible that I didn't love it enough? Yes, it is. This is just the neo-noir movie of the 90s for me. I mean, the main trio of actors are perfectly cast. It was amazing on the big screen, and the villain, who I'm not going to name for spoiler purposes, is one of the best I've ever seen. This second watch just hammered that home even more for me. I think this person belongs up there with the Hans Landas and Anton Chigurhs of the world when we talk villains. Seven is just so eerie. It does what all good thrillers do. It makes you feel viscerally the main characters are not in control of the situation, even sometimes when they are. The visuals are brown tinted and harshly lit, and everything about this unnamed city, it's New York. I mean, it's New York, but they didn't name it. It just feels jaded and broken down and corrupt. Morgan Freeman and Brad Pitt are just magnetic in this movie, and Gwyneth Paltrow really makes the most of her screen time. I don't think I appreciated her enough the first time I watched it through. And that ending. Oh my god, that ending. This might be a big statement, but I think for me it might be Fincher's masterpiece. Now, after this revelation, what I did next was obviously to continue my Disney animated quest, and I watched the original 1991 Beauty and the Beast. I think everyone knows this story by now, but once again, this movie has 5 or so characters with unique personalities and motivations, and that charming ensemble, for me, really was what made this so warm. Lumiere is obviously the MVP. If you disagree, I mean, what are we doing, guys? It made me really curious to watch the live action one too, because Emma Watson doesn't immediately strike me as Belle, but I love her so much as an actress, so we'll see if I get there. Last but absolutely not least, I finished out the month with a real easy breezy watch, a movie that shattered me into 7,000 pieces. Darren Aronofsky's The Whale, 2022 movie that won Brendan Fraser his Best Actor Oscar. And guys, he earned it. I was surprised to see kind of mixed audience reviews for this movie, which should I ever be surprised by that? No. But people seem to be coming away with the idea that this movie was a misery dump, one of those movies that just hammers you with extremely emotional scenes to kind of hide the fact that there's not much substance underneath. Now, if people have an issue with the way obesity or eating disorders were presented in the movie, that's super valid, super not my place to comment on. But in terms of emotional effect, I did not think it was a cheap misery punch. The main character, Charlie, has been through some dark things in his life. I mean, domestic trauma, religious trauma, grief, health issues, and he's in one of the darkest holes a person can be in, and he still chooses to care about people. Now, is he flawed? I mean, yes, very. We find out throughout the story that this guy has really deeply hurt, a lot of the people in his life, and even now is kind of continuing to put them through it to some extent because of his extreme conviction that in his life he's going to do one thing right, even if it costs him everything else. I really want to say more, but spoilers, man, I just can't. Charlie does some things very wrong, but I think it may be getting lost on people, how difficult it is to have any hope or any goals at all when you're in as dark of a place as he is. And for that reason, I didn't find this to be a story of wow, look at this miserable man. I found it to be look at this guy who's in a really, really bad spot, and even still he chooses to care, even when certain people in his life want nothing to do with him, even when it makes his already difficult life much harder, he chooses to care anyway. And yeah, this movie's so sad. I was sobbing on a handful of occasions, but sometimes that's just because of the tenderness of the interactions. I mean, we see characters speak to each other's souls, people who know each other so deeply but can't mean what they used to mean to each other because of the way things have changed. And it's just really sad and heartbreaking. But above all, what it's telling us is those connections still exist, and we need them even when it's not in what you might call our best interests. Care when you shouldn't. That's my number one takeaway from this movie. Care about people who you have every reason not to care about. Your exes, people who have wronged you, people who seem to be making no effort to care about themselves. Even when it makes your life more difficult to care anyway. And sometimes we're in positions where we're going through things and we can't find it inside ourselves to care so radically. And that's fine. You have to take care of yourself before you can extend it out to others. But just never take the easy way out. Care when you can, not when you should. I think every character in this movie, as flawed as they all are, exemplifies that in one way or another. Brendan Fraser, Sadie Sink, Samantha Morton, Hong Chow in this movie, she was everything. That woman is so talented. The subplot with Ty Simpkins' character, it was a little overdone to me, but I didn't think it detracted from the main story all that much. And I know that Darren Aronofsky has this reputation for like showing this graphic, disturbing content and maybe not always having the right amount of substance underneath, but I think paired with this like ultra talented cast, I think this time he found the right mix. Okay, if you're still here by any chance, thank you so much. It never fails to like shock and make me really happy that someone would sit here and listen to what I have to say, especially when there's so much of it. But that about wraps up my movies from January. If I watch any more than that this month, I'm gonna have to condense it into a top 10 or something, because I don't know how much longer than that I really want these videos to be. I appreciate you. Take care of yourself. And I'm not sure exactly what I'll be doing, but I will see you next week. Take care, guys.